The moment Dorothy Fitzgerald cocked that pearl-handled revolver and pointed it at my barn, she shouted at the top of her lungs, "You've got until sundown to move that eyesore off HOA land, mister." It was high noon in Pine Ridge Estates, a recently developed HOA village that had been built around my family's historic ranch property. She was standing at the edge of my great-great-grandfather's barn, which had been built in 1872, waving that gun around like some kind of cartoon character. With a blonde perm, I didn't even flinch. Instead, I calmly reached into my back pocket and pulled out a rolled-up document, unscrolling it in the wind. It was a federal historic landmark certificate, embossed, notarized, and officially blessed by the National Registry. I spoke slowly and clearly, making sure she understood every word. "Dorothy, you just threatened a federal asset with a firearm." Her hands started shaking. The gun dropped to her side. Her mouth fell open like she'd just seen a ghost. That was the moment I knew I had her. But let me back up and tell you how we got to this insane situation in the first place. My name is Tom Henderson, and I'm not the kind of guy who goes looking for trouble. I'm a fifth-generation rancher turned civil engineer, and I inherited Henderson Ranch, a 22-acre plot with a 150-year-old barn, an antique windmill, and a herd of goats that have been in my family for decades. Life was peaceful and quiet, exactly how I liked it. Then came Pine Ridge Estates, a so-called luxury eco-HOA development that bought up all the surrounding land, built identical beige townhomes, and somehow decided that my property fell within what they called the visual footprint of the community. Enter Dorothy Fitzgerald, HOA president, self-proclaimed lifestyle influencer and retired substitute drama teacher with an unhealthy obsession with khaki pants and threatening people with lawsuits. From day one, she had it out for me and my property. She called my land a visual toxin during board meetings and claimed my historic barn violated something she made up called modern harmony aesthetics. At first, I thought she was just another annoying neighbor with too much time on her hands. I had no idea she was about to declare all-out war on me and my family's legacy. The harassment started small, but quickly escalated. First came the fake violations, each one more ridiculous than the last. I received official-looking notices for unauthorized wood coloration not found on the HOA-approved earth tone spectrum. Then there was a citation for possession of heritage livestock without HOA vetting, as if my goats needed their permission to exist. My personal favorite was the complaint about windmill blade rotations causing ambient distress to the community. I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried, but Dorothy wasn't satisfied with just paperwork harassment. She organized what she called compliance walks, which were really just trespassing sessions where HOA members would come onto my property to document violations. She told neighborhood kids not to look at my barn for legal reasons, claiming it could damage their developing aesthetic sensibilities. I started finding notes stuffed to my mailbox with messages like, "Historic doesn't mean immune," and "Your days are numbered, rancher." Dorothy even went so far as to contact local real estate agents, warning them about the unstable man with a feral barn on the edge of Pine Ridge Estates. She claimed my property was bringing down home values by 30%, a number she completely made up. When I put up a private property sign at my gate, she responded by installing a larger sign right next to it that read, "Pending relocation to preserve aesthetic continuity." The woman was completely unhinged. Things reached a boiling point when Dorothy started holding emergency HOA meetings specifically about my property. She would present slideshows comparing my barn to abandoned buildings in ghost towns, claiming both were equally dangerous to the community's well-being. She proposed a special assessment to fund what she called a visual rehabilitation project, which was basically a plan to force me to either modernize my historic structures or tear them down entirely. That's when she made her biggest mistake. One sunny Tuesday afternoon, Dorothy crossed my fence line carrying that pearl-handed revolver and a permit she had printed on pink stationery from her home printer. She claimed it gave her authority to enforce HOA regulations through any means necessary. She actually believed her made-up documents superseded property laws and constitutional rights. What Dorothy didn't know was that I had been preparing for this escalation for 2 years. The moment she started her campaign against my property, I applied to have Henderson Ranch designated as a federal historic site. 3 months before she pulled that gun on me, the application was approved. My barn, my windmill, even my goats were all now federally protected assets. But here's the part that made me smile. There's a clause in the Historic Preservation Code that triggers automatic state and federal response to any hostile attempt to displace or deface a landmark. I had been meticulously documenting every single thing Dorothy did, every trespassing incident, every threatening note, every false violation notice. I had security cameras installed around my property that captured everything in crystal clear high-definition video. I even had drone footage of Dorothy standing in my north pasture yelling, "Let's burn this old thing down and put up a yoga dome," while gesturing wildly at my barn. She had no idea she was being recorded, and she certainly had no idea about the federal protection status. 48 hours after Dorothy waved that gun at my barn, 2 unmarked black SUVs rolled into Pine Ridge Estates. The agents from the Department of the Interior who stepped out were wearing mirrored sunglasses and expressions that meant business. They went straight to Dorothy's house with a warrant and a list of charges that would make any sane person's blood run cold. Dorothy tried to spin the situation in her favor. She claimed she feared for the community's funyu, which isn't even a legal defense. She said the gun wasn't loaded, as if that somehow made threatening a federal landmark acceptable. She even tried to argue that as HOA president, she had sovereign authority over all properties within the visual footprint of Pine Ridge Estates. The federal agents weren't amused by any of her creative interpretations of the law. The evidence against her was overwhelming. I had submitted everything to the authorities, including the drone footage, security camera recordings, copies of all her fake violations, and signed witness statements from neighbors who had seen her trespassing. The agents also discovered that Dorothy had been using HOA funds to pay for her personal legal consultations about how to force me off my land, which added embezzlement to her growing list of crimes. Within a week of the federal investigation beginning, the entire HOA board resigned. Their lawyers cited spiritual exhaustion as the reason for dropping Dorothy as a client. The other board members claimed they had no knowledge of Dorothy's activities, even though I had recordings of them at meetings discussing the visual rehabilitation project. They scattered like roaches when the kitchen light turns on, leaving Dorothy to face the consequences alone. The district attorney's office filed 3 separate charges against Dorothy. First, threatening a federally protected landmark with a firearm, which alone carried up to 5 years in federal prison. Second, attempted intimidation of a private landholder, a state felony with another potential 3 years. Third, unauthorized HOA enforcement beyond jurisdiction, combined with misuse of HOA funds, adding up to 2 more years and requiring full restitution. The trial was swift and decisive. Dorothy's dramatic courtroom performance, complete with fake tears and claims of being victimized by my aggressive rural lifestyle, didn't sway the judge. The video evidence was undeniable. The paper trail of harassment was extensive. Even her own social media posts, where she had bragged about taking down the eyesore rancher, worked against her. When the verdict came down, Dorothy Fitzgerald was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, 3 years probation, and ordered to pay $150,000 in fines and restitution. She was permanently banned from serving on any HOA board and required to stay at least 500 FT away from my property at all times. The moment the judge read the sentence, Dorothy's face turned white as a sheet. She stood up, pointed at me, and screamed that I had ruined her life before her lawyer grabbed her arm and pulled her back down. The Bayef moved closer as she continued sobbing uncontrollably, mascara running down her cheeks while she muttered something about historic barns being unconstitutional.